Speaking of Texas, Republicans there are actually pushing new voting restrictions aimed at the state's most populous county, an emerging Democratic stronghold, which includes the city of Houston. The New York Times highlights how lawmakers are pushing dozens of new election bills in the Republican-dominated state legislature, including limits on polling places and a mechanism for the state to order new elections if voting problems occur. Some county officials tell the New York Times these election bills do not address legitimate voting issues that have actually arisen in Harris County. With us now, the Harris County attorney, Christian Menefee. Christian, thanks so much for being with us. Talk about these new proposals and the threat that you think they pose.
The intent of these bills is clear. It's not about making elections better. It's about Republican leaders not being able to win the hearts and minds of people in some of the most diverse counties in the state of Texas. So they're now taking steps to take that power by force. That's why you're seeing them push laws that would stop vote by mail for folks who are over 65 and active duty service persons. That's why you're seeing bills that would stop countywide polling and would instead force individuals to vote at a very specific location. And most egregiously, that's why you're seeing a push to empower an individual who's appointed, the Secretary of State appointed by the governor of Texas, to allow that person to overturn election results. This is about stacking the deck so that they can centralize power in the governor's mansion and at the headquarters for the Republican Party of Texas in Austin. It's wrong. In our most diverse cities and counties in the state of Texas, the people who cast their ballots for local elected leaders should have their votes respected, not disregarded.
Christian, Al Sharpton, is there also the possibility, since you're talking about Harris County, which is Houston, probably the largest county of also black voters in the state, as well as a large Latino populace there. And I've been talking to some of our leaders there that work with NAN, Reverend Terry Anderson and others. Is it possible to get the Justice Department to look at it from a civil rights point of view in terms of investigating? Does it disenfranchise voters based on race, as you're also looking at your lawsuit?
You know, it's an important point to make that each and every one of these laws is by design being aimed at Harris County, one of the most diverse counties, home to the city of Houston, one of the most diverse cities in the entire country, with more than 100 languages spoken. And that's exactly why, if some of these more egregious bills were to pass, my office, the civil legal office for that county, is going to file a lawsuit. But we've seen in the past that wherever opportunity we get to partner with the Justice Department or to partner with advocacy legal groups that bring these types of lawsuits on a regular basis, we're going to do so. This is about protecting the vote of each and every person who lives in Harris County, including black and brown people. You know, I say this as a black man whose grandfather paid a poll tax right here in this very state, the state of Texas. I think that we're better than that. And so the misuse of the word disenfranchisement is really just an attempt to turn and take these egregious voting policies that are restrictive and are designed to stop people from voting for diverse folks in the biggest county in the state of Texas. We're going to do everything we can with all the firepower we have legally, including partner with advocacy groups and with the Justice Department to push back against this.
Christian, I assume that the one part I noticed of this bill was trying to overturn the will of the people in heavily populated areas, which I assume, coincidentally not, is those areas that are the most blue parts of Texas. That is Dallas-Fort Worth area and the Houston area. Talk about how this mechanism, what they're designing here. I mean, are they going to have the ability, if this were to actually become law and pass legal muster, to them supplant the judgment of the voters in Houston, Texas and Dallas-Fort Worth at the ballot box? I don't understand how this would actually work. How would they trigger this power to take over what the voters had done?
That's exactly what they're attempting to do, is overturn the will of the voters. And we're already seeing this from Republican losing candidates out in Harris County. More than 22 election challenges have been filed in Harris County to overturn the will of the voters from the November 2022 elections. And when that happened, you saw state officials, multiple state officials, call for a redo of elections in Harris County. And so this bill would do exactly that. It would empower the Secretary of State, who is an official appointed directly and answerable directly to the governor of Texas, to unilaterally decide to overturn election results in Harris County. I think what you would see if that were to happen would be electoral chaos. When people, especially, you got to think about the single mother, right, who gets off work, who needs to get home to her kids, but instead makes time to go to the polls and cast her ballot. You're going to tell her that her vote is not worthy of being counted and not worthy of being respected. And they would overturn these election results simply because they disagree with the process or they disagree with the folks who are running elections in these large counties. And that's why I continually say this isn't about making elections better in the state of Texas. Instead, it's about two things. It's about making it more difficult for folks in large metropolitan areas to vote, and it's about making it more difficult to run elections. It's about demonizing elections in these large metropolitan areas. And what's incredibly sad about this is the people who vote in these elections, the people who run these elections, they're not just Democrats. They're folks of all political persuasions, Democrat, Independent, Republican, and they take their time out to ensure that our democracy works. But instead, we're seeing a governor, an attorney general, a state senate, and a state legislator that is taking their time out to overturn the will of the voters. And that's why it's so incredibly important that nationally people know what's going on in Texas, because we all know that the path to flipping the state of Texas comes through Harris County. And it's incredibly imperative that we protect those votes.
All right, attorney for Harris County, Texas, Christian Menefee, thank you so much. And still ahead.